The air was heavy, suffocating. Thick clouds loomed over the small fishing village of Kalatagan like a dark omen. Everyone had heard the warnings. A typhoon was approaching, fiercer than any they had ever known. But for the villagers, there was no time to evacuate. The sea, their lifeblood, was unforgiving, and many were forced to stay behind to safeguard their homes and boats. Amidst this chaos was Lina, a widowed mother, who had lost her husband to the ocean's rage years before. She stood by the window of her small nipa hut, gazing anxiously at the sky, her young son, Tomas, playing by the hearth. The wind had already begun to howl, rattling the bamboo walls, and the waves could be heard crashing violently against the shore. As the storm approached, something strange happened. Lina's heart pounded in her chest as she noticed the wind. It wasn't just howling, it was whispering. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but the more she listened, the clearer it became, like a distant voice carried on the storm, calling her name. Her skin prickled. She stepped closer to the window, peering into the darkness. The sky outside had turned a menacing greenish-black, and the wind was now tearing through the village with savage intensity. But the whispering persisted, soft and insistent, rising and falling with the storm. She backed away, clutching her chest. Her eyes darted to Tomas, who was still playing innocently with his wooden toys, oblivious to the growing terror outside. She wanted to ignore the voice, but it gnawed at her, pulling her attention back to the window. The whispers grew louder, overlapping now, and though the words were indistinct, their tone was unmistakable, a beckoning. And then she saw them. Out in the rising waters, just beyond the mangroves, shadowy figures floated on the crests of the waves. They were barely distinguishable from the spray and foam, but their faces, gaunt, pale, their hollow eyes glowing faintly in the storm's dim light. Lina gasped, stepping back. These weren't people. They were the drowned, souls taken by the sea long ago. And one face among them made her heart stop. Her husband. He stood there, chest deep in the angry waters, his eyes locked on hers. He had the same expression he wore the day he disappeared, a mix of longing and sorrow. But now there was something darker in his gaze, something hungry.
Come to me.
Her body went cold. She had mourned him for years, but the sight of him now, amidst the howling wind and crashing waves, filled her with dread. The other drowned souls surrounded him, their arms outstretched, their mouths open in silent screams. Suddenly, Tomas stood beside her, clutching her leg.
Mama, what's wrong?
Nothing, Tomas. We're safe. Stay here.
The storm outside intensified. The wind shrieked, rattling the walls so violently that Lina feared the entire hut would collapse. Water began to seep through the floorboards, flooding the room inch by inch. But it wasn't just seawater. It smelled of decay, of rot, like the ocean was vomiting up its dead. The whispering returned, now louder, more insistent.
Come to us. We have break the door. See takes one soul.
She clutched Tomas tightly, her mind spinning. The voices, they were all around her now, inside the house, swirling with the wind. The drowned souls pounded on the windows with skeletal hands, their faces twisted in agony, their mouths forming desperate words that she couldn't hear but felt deep in her bones. Then came a loud crack. The roof split open and the wind roared into the house. Lina screamed, shielding Tomas as debris flew around them. But through the chaos, she saw the figures from the sea, crawling, slithering through the open doorway, their cold, wet bodies dragging themselves toward. Her husband was at the front, his eyes pleading.
Lina, join us. It's not so bad. We're waiting for you. We've always been
You're not him. He's gone.
the figure grinned, a grotesque imitation of the man she had loved. The water was up to her knees now, cold and thick, and with every step, it felt like invisible hands were grabbing at her legs, pulling her down. Tomas clung to her, his small body shaking with fear. In a panic, she turned toward the back door, but the water was rising faster than she could move. Suddenly, something sharp wrapped around her ankle, a hand, cold and decayed, dragging her down into the icy depths that had overtaken her home. Tomas screamed as she fell, her body pulled under the water. She kicked and thrashed, her lungs burning, her vision blurring, but the hands kept pulling, and through the dark water she saw their faces. Her husband's, her neighbors, all twisted and grotesque as they whispered. With one final burst of strength, Lina broke free from the hands and pushed Tomas toward the stairs, her voice cracking as she shouted, but it was too late. The door to the house burst open, and the sea surged in, filling every corner. The whispers became a deafening roar, and Lina's vision went dark as the water claimed her. When the typhoon finally passed, the village of Kalatagan lay in ruins. Houses were shattered, trees uprooted, and the sea had reclaimed most of the land. Rescue teams combed through the debris, searching for survivors. But there were few to be found. Among the missing were Lina and Tomas. Days later, when the waters receded, some villagers swore they saw strange figures standing at the edge of the shore, shadowy, translucent figures staring out to sea. And if you listened closely, they said, you could still hear the whispers of the drowned carried on the wind, calling for more.